For so many years, I used to warm up by going through the motions, going through the reps, warming up on a bike, whatever. And I realized that it was never really adding anything to my actual workout. I wasn't getting something out of it. And I actually stumbled across this mountain of a man on Instagram, Judd Lienhard, when I saw some of your stuff and you were skipping. You were literally skipping. And I was like, for activation and getting the neurological system going. So I'm like, okay, you got to come out here and we got to do some content surrounding like proper warm-ups, proper like biomechanics in an unconventional way. So I'll turn it to you, man. Like, what is wrong with conventional warm-ups? After today's video, I put a link down below for an entire variety pack of LMNT electrolyte flavors. So their citrus salt, their lemon habanero, their mango chili, their chocolate salt, their unflavored, all their awesome flavors. You get a free variety pack with any purchase. One of the things that I have talked about in other videos is if you're sleep deprived, sipping on electrolytes does help make it so that you're not wanting to eat everything in sight. Because we do know the literature suggests your brain gets activated a lot more by food cues when you're sleep deprived. I've noticed personally, anecdotally, sipping on electrolytes seems to help. They are a sponsor on this channel, they do support this channel, and your support in trying them not only is something I'd recommend, but it helps keep us doing what we're doing. So I thank you for giving them a shot. And I highly, highly do recommend them. So that link is down below, just beneath this video in the top line of the description.
So, rather than address it as like right or wrong, let's go optimal, suboptimal, right? And so the warm up, when people refer to it as a warm up, that's not wrong because we do want our body a little bit warm normally, but it's incomplete, right? So there's a complete disregard for the nervous system when we prep ourselves. And that's the term I prefer over warming up is the prep. Yeah. It's a commonly used term. And we have to prep the nervous system to be prepared to conduct that workout. So I think of nervous system prep as my goal prior to a workout. And it doesn't just prep and then I'm in the workout, it blends into the workout systematically. That's the strategy I employ. So it's a little cheesy, but I kind of go with a simple, I like to categorize and simplify as much as I can. So I just go with the slow, the flow, the go, the grow, the show in order. So it's a systematic progression.
I like it. Say that again.
So we're going to go slow. Okay. And I can go into each one of these in depth, but it's...
Yeah, we're going to actually go through the actual workouts and the movements themselves.
So slow can be no movement at all. Okay. But if there is movement, it's either a very slow movement or a pulsing type movement to hold positions of tension at different joint angles. Got it. And that in itself will prep the nervous system and prep the tissues to train. So, there's two things that go into force, right? Or into force. It's load and speed, mass times acceleration, but let's just dumb it down. It's how much load and how fast is that load moving? Okay. It will equal the force. So when people warm up, they tend to they focus on the load. They know inherently I shouldn't lift a lot of weight or move a lot of weight. They completely disregard the speed factor of force. So they think by doing lightweight really fast, it's safe, it's not hurting their tissues, and it's prepping them effectively. So I tend to turn that on its head a little bit. I will go a moderate load or at least moderate tension and either take the speed out completely, so it's not an isometric, like a holding a tension position, or go very slowly. Got it. Like a 1 minute push-up type thing.
Let's maybe go through that. Maybe let's like dissect this into the segments and where we've got slow. So let's like do a couple things with what slow would look like maybe for upper and lower body.
Okay, sure. So really it's progressive tension at different joint angles. So a really common thing that I'd like to do is the 1 minute push-up. Okay. To where you're spending a little bit of time at each joint angle, and while you're doing that, you're focusing on your breathing and you're focusing on the biomechanical, the patterning of that movement as you go through. So another thing that slow does for you, it gives your brain time to think and absorb the proper patterning for what you're gonna have to do later. So when we start the movements too fast, we're not really thinking of proper patterning, and if anything, it might be wiring in improper patterning. So the slow also lets your brain kind of know how it's gonna have to move, and that's gonna transition a little bit to the flows that we'll get to next.
Gotcha.
So, any kind of slow would be, even, so let's just say for an upper body movement, we're gonna get on the ground and we're just gonna start with a very deliberate, very conscientious, like abs drawn in, glutes squeezed, elbows tucked, chin or chest pointed down to the ground actually, and a very slow lower. And what I always tell people here is you want to pretend like you're on camera or surveillance, and you want to move so slow that if somebody was looking at it casually, they wouldn't be able to see that you were moving. They would just look over and you would to them just be in a different position, and they might not even notice it until you're all the way on the ground. And then when you're on that ground right there, you just hold under isometric tension. It doesn't even have to be a full range of motion, just where you have the most joint tension and you feel good. And then just slowly start to press up at the same speed, drawing those abs in. And I'm talking right now, but normally you just be focused on being able to breathe under tension.
So this is prepping the nervous system in this case?
It is, and muscular system, peripheral too, muscles, tendons, not just the nervous system. But also talking disrupts it, but being able to breathe under tension is huge. That's like the pinnacle, right? Yeah. We want tension, but we want to be able to breathe under tension. So if you have to hold a position for more than 10 or 20 seconds, you're going to have to breathe. Yeah. So we have to practice breathing under tension and focus on where we are feeling the tension. So to me, we're going to go over this later, but breathing is huge. And how and where you hold that tension. And then we talked about the skipping and stuff. Yeah. Not just the force production of the muscle, but being able to sequence the limbs in a way that the antagonist muscles are relaxing appropriately to make movement more efficient.
Gotcha.
So that the bouncing and stuff, a lot of that is just movement efficiency. So
with this slow type thing, for lower body, could you just do the same, like a 1 minute air squat?
You could. I like slow lunging. Supported slow lunging is one of my favorites, or plie squatting. So, we just find anything we can. And I like the support just because you don't have to balance. Sometimes I take factors out. So I will take a nice split stance here, and I will just hold different joint angles here, feeling the appropriate knee forward, feeling my dorsiflexion start to work, letting that back, and using this as needed, and just hold a position. And maybe when you're down there, you can just take it off or even hold it as a load if you want, and then put it back on. And then slowly start to come up and let yourself rest. You'd be surprised, like a 30-second slow lunge will get your muscles pretty fatigued. And just, I tell people in the morning, a lot of people don't want to get on the ground and move fast in the morning. I understand that. Yeah. Just do a 1 minute push-up and a 1 minute slow lunge on each side, and that is infinitely better than not doing anything at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
When I first kind of recognized the value in something like this is I noticed, if I got up in the morning and I did a pistol squat or something, and if I tried to do that right when I got out of bed, it's like, it wouldn't even work. The brain wouldn't compute. But if I held on to something and I did just one rep, then all of a sudden I can do it. Yeah. And that's when it clicked with me, where it's this is not a matter of being loose. This is a matter of turning on. Because it's I'm definitely not loose. I've literally done one flipping rep. I just did one assisted rep to put me into the pattern. And then after that, it was I could do it. Whereas if you asked me to do it rolling out of bed, do a pistol squat, I'd fall forward. It's just not going to happen.
That's a great example. And also take the amortization phase out, the transition between down to up.
Yeah.
So start at the bottom position, whatever that bottom position is for you. It doesn't have to be a full range of motion. I hate that term because a full range of motion is different for everybody, right? So whatever your full range of motion is on that particular day, start sitting on a bench, generate tension, and then slowly feel that tension build until you start to move. Yeah. Rather than start going down and try to stop that momentum. You know what I mean? Yep. We always start our exercise going down first.
For sure.
And then we hope we can stop it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So start at the down position, generate tension, and then it gives you time to kind of figure out the pattern and the balance and to where you get it to where you start to move.
Yes.
For sure.
And there's other things that obviously that you can probably do under slow, I would imagine.
It's almost limitless. You know what I mean? Whatever pattern you want to work on that day. I will use the rings and TRX for a lot of the slow and just hold a bodyweight row position. Yeah. And then, lift one leg off the ground at a time so you're forced to shift weight as you do it. Things like that.
Any rules to kind of avoid, things to avoid when you're in the slow phase? Any positions you don't want to put yourself in as far as?
Not really, because the positions are all, whether they're dangerous or not, there's no bad exercise, right? There's just inappropriate employment of exercises, right? So it's all dependent on how long is the lever, how heavy is the load, how fast is the movement. Yeah. You know what I mean? And if you can control those factors, you can make any movement safe as long as the range of motion, the lever length, the speed, and the load aren't beyond your capabilities to sustain those.
For sure.
Yeah, so that's basically it. As long as, if it's, another thing too, if you go slow, you'll give yourself time to stop the movement before something bad happens.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah. So the flows, my flows are associated with bands. They don't have to use bands because I just love bands a lot. So to be quite honest, I forever refer to these as sequence movements.
Okay.
Because it's joint sequence. Because there is some common universal sequencing that goes on in athletic movements.
Yeah.
So the throwing motion or the hitting motion of a golf ball, a baseball, a javelin, a football, they all seem drastic. Throwing a punch, but there's similarities in the movement chain that occurs throughout. Like, all of our limbs don't move together. Our limbs will flow or go through a sequence that load potential energy and then are released effectively, right?
Yeah.
So there's a ton of similarities in movement patterns across athletics. So I will just employ that basic sequencing pattern for different variations of flow movements. And then the flow movements are basically, I categorize them in faster, lighter flows, kind of a tempo movement, and to slower, heavier flows.
Got it.
But I normally don't combine the two that early in the workout.
Okay.
So I'll just use a lighter band than this.
Okay.
So I have my own flows that I use, but the cool thing about these is, since they're slow, you can kind of be creative with them a little bit, and you're probably not going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
So, one of them is the crusher, to where I'll generate tension here first. So, so there are universal patterns, right? Like scapular protraction, spinal flexion, internal rotation. Those all tend to go together.
Okay.
Like even bench press, elite bench pressers, when they press, they'll let the shoulder blade move and they'll internally rotate, or at least apply internal rotation on their humerus. So it's a universal pattern. And then when we row, we tend to want to straighten our back, retract our scapula, depress our scapula, and externally rotate as we row. It's just kind of a universal human thing to do, right?
For sure.
So I'll start with a lot of flexion, internal rotation, thumb down, apply tension, rotate. I'll get that going. I'll feel how that feels. I stack joints. Your body likes straight lines, so I stack the joint. And then I'll focus on knife edging into the ground. I'll internally rotate that back knee, shift my weight this way so I create a stable base. And once that flows to here, I have that ground force tension here. Then I can dig and hold isometric tension. And then since it's a band, it's accommodating. So when I get that back to that range of motion, there's not this thing pulling me back.
Yeah.
So you can do these with cable stack. The one drawback is it's not accommodating. So when you get to this range of motion, you're still being pulled.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? But a cable stack is just fine too.
Gotcha. So this is an example of flow. So I'm going to do it, and you can kind of correct me on it. So, okay, so I was...
Yep. So I normally go all the way through and I grab the band.
Okay.
Like this. Put your hand all the way through.
Okay.
And then... hold on.
Oh, gotcha.
And then grab the actual band with a hand.
Got it.
It doesn't have to be. It's just the most comfortable.
Got it. So in this case...
So start with a back rounded, internally rotate.
Okay.
And thumb down on that left side.
Okay.
And then now tension, pull the shoulder blade back, flatten out the back, all in one smooth motion with just the left hand first. And then you'll feel everything kind of get tense. Yep. And then now you're gonna focus on the inside edge of that push leg. It's outside your center of mass.
Okay.
So this hip bone is mostly stacked over that leg.
Okay.
And you're gonna put on the inside edge called knife edging, and you're gonna internally rotate that a little bit first. And that'll give you that glute drive.
Yep.
And then once you get that tension, then you're gonna kind of pull a little bit more with this and push and squeeze and hold. Good. Good job. And now we're gonna stack that elbow and we're gonna drive down into the ground a little bit. That's perfect right there. And all you're doing is just holding tension. So there's a lot of the slow elements still in these.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's definitely a spinal decompression that happens with that too.
Yeah.
I feel like I almost feel more activated out of doing that upper body than if I did 2 warm-up sets with dumbbells or something.
So this is the danger with warm-ups is we're already a little compressed in our spine, right? We've been sitting or laying down all day, whatever injuries we got, and then we start the warm-up by jumping.
Yeah.
So we're just pounding on that spine, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but maybe we should do some stuff first before we start to just have impacts right away.
And turning, as simple and basic as it sounds, turning the abs on a little bit, turning the core on a tiny bit. It's
absolutely
most conventional bodybuilding or anything like that. You might train the core a tiny bit at the end or something, but you're never actively trying to turn it on.
So another thing, these aren't completely useless for hypertrophy either. There is a stimulus here. It's not like a jumping jack, which does very little for hypertrophy. Since there's tension in the muscles, there is a tension stimulus, a time under tension stimulus. So you're getting a little stimulus for hypertrophy. Yeah. It's not something I would consider significant. So you're not just completely wasting this time in your workout, only getting the benefit of warming up your body.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you are working your abs, there's a hypertrophy. And now when you move on to the go, the first movements in the go, and that's what I like to think of as most athletic movements, are still fairly slow movements, but they're unilateral. but they're heavier.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of core in there. You start to get a fairly significant hypertrophy stimulus there, you know, and it just progresses you further into the workout.
Gotcha. Could you show me an example of a flow? I guess this would still be a flow for lower body too. This is almost a full body because you're getting that glute turned on.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So then, okay, so you move, so you go slow, you go flow, you go is the next one?
Go, yes.
Okay.
So those, when you think of goes, think of your jumps, your cleans, your snatches.
Okay.
But also right before those, it's more athletic based upper body movements, let's say, where like the main thing I want to work is, let's say my chest, right? But you're on your feet to some extent, you're using your core. It's a total body movement that just focuses on whatever you're trying to work at that particular time. So like a single arm ring push up, where you're having to engage your core, you're having to be aware of what your body's doing, you're having to be aware of your balance. So I say go for those because it's something that's going to it's going to translate directly into real life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like very rarely, bench press has definite value, but very rarely in real life do we get the benefit of laying on the back and pushing on something, right? But it has benefits for other reasons. Yeah. These are more like life, like direct.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
So that is the next step in the process, and then I'll go do the power type, faster movements while I'm still fresh.
Got it.
So
it's like, I mean, this all kind of can be consolidated into, I mean, I guess it's really the slow and the flow that are more the active warm-up component of it.
Yes.
And how many sets of like a slow or a flow would you typically do?
So my standard is like 2 sets of 6, just the standard. But if you feel like you need a little bit more time or need to practice it, it's not like if you do 3 or 4 sets, it's it's not heavily taxing on you. So if you have the time and want to do it, but a general thumb, 2 sets of 6 with probably about a 1 to 2 second hold at every position, so you're feeling that position.
Okay, so and then you showed me one earlier that was really interesting when you had the band up high and it was kind of spinal decompression and you were kind of, which was really interesting for me with a bad back. It's super interesting, and most people that I talk to end up having bad backs anyway. So it's, and would this kind of categorize as under flow as well, or
this would be slow actually?
Okay.
It could be flow if you go a little faster. You know, I normally don't use it for flows, but all right. So here's the thing with spinal decompression. People love to do hangs. You know, like hang.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Like it's too much of a stimulus, so your body's going to tense up to kind of prevent. If your feet are unsupported, your body will tense up because it feels it being pulled down. So it needs to be a very gentle stimulus. Like you might not even feel a ton in your spine. It's just as you squat, you need to feel just a gentle tug up. And it's always good to have something else anchored.
Yeah.
And I like to do it in conjunction with a squat because then you kind of get that posterior pelvic tilt to where if you hang, your pelvis wants to tilt forward. Okay. You know, and the anterior tilt is something we struggle with anyway. Yeah. So I always like to have my feet anchored on something. It can be a lunge position, a squat position, whatever. Just I like to have them on the ground, basically. So there's no one right way that you have to do this, but so I kind of run my elbows through, I kind of loop my arms over, and it's just maybe a thicker band, for bigger guys. But then I'm far enough away so it's kind of pulling me forward, and I don't fight that flexion. We're always like told to fight spinal flexion. Like we need to let the back round and just like sink down into it and just let that band pull your spine away from where you're sinking. It shouldn't be very painful. And then while you're down there, so it's kind of 2 birds with 1 stone, right? Like we're in a good squat position here, but it's not really taxing. So we can start to move around down here and kind of get the lower body prepped to go while we're down here. And then you can even let go with 1 arm, and then you'll get like a little thoracic spine rotation in there. But there's no one right way you have to do it. You can kind of play around, and while you're down there, you can drop a leg back too. And kind of get that oblique sling a little bit, kind of there. And then you can kind of rock back. So see how I'm kind of gripping the band here? And then I'll just let my body rock away from that band, and it'll just kind of elongate my spine. Just like I'm talking right now, but make sure you're breathing and relaxing. Practicing, the 1 in 2 out breath that I talked about earlier during this time. Don't listen to intense music, that kind of thing, So, and you don't have to do this every time, but if you have a bad back or you've been sitting in an airplane or in a car, I would definitely decompress your spine before you get into all the spinal compression stuff. Yeah. And I think not just for safety, I think exercise performance as well. Really? And so most spinal decompression studies that I've read, it just has to do with pain alleviation. Yeah. But you and me both know when we're in pain, sometimes it'll shut down our performance a little bit. Like we'll try to push on something and it just won't let us. Yep. So if you can alleviate a little bit of discomfort and pain, it's going to help. It helps me anyway push harder later in the workout. For sure. Especially if it's coming from that column, the central column. You know what I mean? Is there an element of like obviously like Louis Simmons was big on like a reverse hyper, Mark Bell was big on a reverse hyper. I've had success with a reverse hyper, but when I was taught using the reverse hyper initially, I was taught wrong. Whereas Mark kind of taught me, he's like, it's really about getting flexion. Like it is like it's not about
the glutes. It's more about like, he's like, use the weight to try to, if you're in a reverse hyper, you want to try to see your feet. And that was such a game changer. And I don't know if it's an element of just, are you pumping blood into an area that's usually not getting it, or are you just getting yourself in an uncomfortably yet controlled position?
So reverse hypers are very dangerous. I love them.
Yeah.
Just like leg press. I don't mind leg press at all. Very dangerous though.
Yeah.
And because people, they hyperextend their back to perform movement, right?
Yep.
Even if you do it correctly, if you have the wrong type of back injury, and I think even Louis Simmons admitted this later, it'll make it way worse.
Yeah.
He just had to have the right type of back injury where that was exactly what he needed.
Yep.
So you really have to talk to the athlete and figure out what's the mechanism, like what side of your disc is that bulge on?
Yeah.
Because if it's already coming out the back, it's going to make it way worse. Like you actually need a little bit of pulling forward in that case. And I can go over some other time, like ways to do that, to change levels to where it's not that shearing force on your spine.
Yeah.
But I love reverse hypers. They're not for everyone, for sure. Yeah. And you have to be kind of fairly strong and fairly proprioceptively in tune before I would recommend using those. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even just start out with no weight on your legs. Just learn to lift your leg up behind you.
Or even just regular, regular back hyperextension, just do something simple just to kind of like get yourself in.
I mean, the 45 degree, I hate calling it a back extension first.
Yeah.
The 45 degree hip hinge machine. I love those things.
Yeah.
They're almost universally used incorrectly.
Yeah.
Like it took like the fitness girls to start rounding their back so they could target their glutes, which that's great and all, but to get people to start using those things correctly. Like you do not initiate coming up with spinal flexion.
No, it's all the wrong movement. Yep.
Like I feel this in my back. I'm like, well, because you're using your back.
Yeah.
Like let your spine hang. And then I actually, on the way up, I'm digressing here, but on a 45 degree, I drive through my toes.
Yeah.
So we're so conditioned because of deadlift, deadlift, you can't drive through your toes. 45 degrees different, your hips are supported. Drive through your toes, you take your gastroc out of it for the plantar flexion, you lengthen the lever, and you make it way more effective by, on the way up, digging through your toes and not your heels.
Gotcha.
Like it's just like little tricks of the trade, or like on the way up, favor one side more than the other to make one hamstring work more than the other, things like that,
You showed me one, I think it was still part of the kind of the, when you were with the single ring, where it was kind of coming up and driving that way. Was that more of a slow or a flow movement?
That would be one of the go movements for you, actually. So,
okay. But it had such an activation for me where I didn't really feel turned on. I felt turned on. That move turned me on. I didn't feel like I was clicked on until that movement, right? And this is a good example to show kind of what a go movement would be, I suppose. So much more, I hate the word functional, but in a way, a functional movement that would actually translate.
So, like these two exercises will fall in the same go category, but they're very different. Like a kettlebell clean and this are both go movements, but they're a different, like the flow is literally flowing into the go. Okay. So this has elements of both, right? So this is like the first of the go. It's going to have a lot of flow similarities. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And then later on in the go part will be more the explosive,
Got it.
So if you don't feel like you need the flows, then maybe don't do as many of them. If you feel like you're a young guy, you can go right into this, it's totally fine. You know what I mean? So do you want me to demonstrate that?
Yeah, let's see it, because
this is one of my favorites, man.
Yeah, it's a really good one just for getting going.
So I normally like to keep this leg straight, and then I'll kind of dig in a little bit, be very active through the lower body, pull very hard first in conjunction with a heel dig into the ground and explosive movement, and then just finish with a good push through the left arm, letting your hips tilt in a natural way, and then just kind of find a rhythm. You just want to finish with like a little half-second pause there at the top.
Gotcha.
So it's not just a back movement. You're here, and then you're coming over the top, and you're pushing here, so you're kind of getting a little peck in there.
Yeah.
Multiple body parts.
It feels like something that would give it a shot too. So it's the same straight leg as the arm that's holding.
Yes.
In that case.
Yep.
So in this case, it's.
Yep, there you go. Yep. And then dig hard through, that's good. Dig hard through the lower body, pull hard at the same time, transition to a hard push, like sequence. That's perfect, man.
Yeah, I could see that.
And then now let your chest fully turn towards me at the top. There you go. And you can let that foot rotate towards me too at the top.
Gotcha.
There you go, that's it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I feel that good through the T-spine personally.
So one of my favorite supersets to do is lunge stance single arm, to where you go down, you're letting your spine rotate, and then pushing up and finishing with one arm. So it's kind of opposite of what we just did. So I'll do those in like conjunction.
Interesting.
So you're down here, and when you get to a point where you can't, you let everything rotate, and then you kind of explode up and hold. That's a little high for that, but still works.
While we're on the topic of getting warmed up, getting sort of activated, if you will, personally, like one of the biggest struggles that I have, yes, I have a bad low back, but it's my T-spine that's really the problem, right? Like I'm super tight T-spine. My issues ultimately end up being shoulder driven, that pulls into my hips being hard to get into hip extension because I've got so much thoracic tightness. Anything that you would recommend for people? People don't always realize they have a thoracic tightness issue either, right? Like so much kyphosis with just our daily lives. Like anything that you would do to kind of, I don't want to say open that up because that's not necessarily what we want to do, but to feel like that's not bunched up and turned on. Because when that feels good, I can breathe and I can function.
So I would say part of that is we're probably protected here because we're trying to keep a tight, compact position.
Yeah.
And it's just more the mobility in general.
Yeah.
Rather than working on things where we're always here. So when people say good posture, this is like a pet peeve of mine, all of our pet peeves, and everybody wants to do this.
Yeah.
Like that's not good posture.
No.
Like you can be tilted forward in here, like, and that's not, like when you run, everybody says chest up, like that's not how people run.
Yeah.
So your posture starts with your pelvis, which actually starts with your tib anterior, and it works its way up from there. So strengthen your tib anterior, you know.
Interesting.
And if you're not an athlete, you're gonna have to do it artificially. But if you're an athlete, it's probably already fairly strong.
Yeah.
If you do a lot of hiking like you do weighted, your tibs are already strong, man.
Yep.
So without that, that's a lot of people consider that your posture muscle. It'll let you like tilt forward, or you'll have to like stand, you know, further to make up for a weak tib. So it starts with your lower leg and foot, actually. Make sure your feet are strong, lower leg strong. Then after that, you know, it's just like focus on drawing your abs in and like pulling your hips under you to make sure, you know, the old adage is like, your hips are a bowl and you make sure you don't spill water out of it. Like pull your hips under you, and that is the foundation of posture. And then from there, just don't try to pull your shoulders back, just supinate your hands a little bit.
Yeah, interesting.
You know what I mean? And then that is like good posture. So bad posture, other than the lower leg and the pelvis tilt, it starts with like always internally rotating our...
Yeah, I can see that.
And this is a big problem. We think that rows balance presses, and they don't. Because your pec is your primary transverse adductor, right? Your lat is your primary extender and transverse adductor, primary one. Both of those are attached to the medial side of your humerus, and both of those internally rotate your humerus. So we can get really strong at pressing, really strong at rotating, and we'll still be internally rotated. If we're not doing anything that opens us up, we're always gonna have this like, and then that is gonna lead to that, you know? So just making sure that we do like external rotation movements. A lot of our rowing is like with an open hand, and then that's gonna help open us up more than just seated rows where we like hyperextend our spine.
Well, when you see it when you're bench pressing heavy, or when powerlifters tear their lat benching, right? I mean, it's a perfect example, right? It's like,
use your lats a lot when you bench.
Like when you're bench pressing, it's like you are. I mean, if I can be honest, like a lot of times I'll feel it more in my lats than I will in my chest, because I'm a lat
means you're doing it right.
I'm a lat dominant person too. So it's like, you know, coming here, it's like it's all lat for me, right? So I don't get into that hung up tight position on chest day. I get that way on back day because this is all getting tight and it's kind of causing me to internally rotate more. Whereas contrary to what people might think, it's like on a back day, you're gonna walk out of there like this. No, I usually walk out of back day like this, right?
So what I would do, and I have that problem too, is I'll start with a band, and as I pull, I'll just externally rotate my hands, and I'll just superset that with my rows.
Interesting.
And that'll be just enough of a stimulant. Or when I do like my rear delt work, I'll focus on internal rotation as I transverse. And that's just enough to kind of keep you open. Like for, you know, I don't recommend bench pressing for pitchers, but a lot of times we got to work in the system as trainers that they're already in. I can't tell my pitcher not to bench press, and then he goes to a strength coach and he says, well, my private trainer told me not to bench press. Like that's going to go over like a fart in church. For sure. So like I will tell them, hey man, do your bench presses because you have to. Just in between your bench presses, have a band and just do external rotation. You know what I mean? Transfer, and then that'll be enough to help balance that out.
No, definitely.
You know what I mean? We get tight not by what we do, but by what we fail to do.
Interesting. I like that. Well, perfect, man. Well, we're going to film some more stuff. But Judd, where can everyone find you, brother?
Right now it's juddlienhard.com, and then you find me on Instagram at Judd Lienhard.
Right on, man. Thanks. Cool.